Hey there, welcome to LSAT Demon Daily. I'm Nathan Fox. I'm one of the founders of LSATdemon.com and the weekly podcast Thinking LSAT. With me today is Erik Johansson, a teacher with us at LSAT Demon. Erik, we've got an email from Jacquelyn.
Hello. I've been studying for the LSAT for a few months now. One thing I've been struggling with is the jargon the LSAT uses. I find I end up getting answers wrong just because I don't know what a specific word means. For example, I got a question wrong because I didn't know the definition of onus. O-N-U-S. Onus. Do you know that word, Nathan?
Yeah, you would say the onus is on you, the applicant,
Mm-hmm.
to do your due diligence and research law schools before applying. The
Yeah.
onus is on a law student to figure out the onus is on applicants to figure out how much law school actually costs
Mm-hmm.
because there's no line on the ABA 509 report that says actual price paid.
Nope.
Instead, the onus is on you. You have to look at the tuition, and then you have to go down to the grants and scholarships, and then you have to do subtraction to figure out, okay, well, what are most people actually paying? And they make it impossible. The onus is on you. It means like,
Mm-hmm. Like
yeah, just
responsibility.
sure. Yeah.
Right.
Responsibility. Mhm.
Jacquelyn continues, since I didn't know what onus meant, I wasn't able to answer the question properly. Once I found out what it meant, it made sense. This has been a recurring problem, and I was wondering if you have any advice on how to broaden my vocabulary for the LSAT. I think of myself as pretty literate, but obviously I need some help. Is there anything I should read to help increase my vocabulary? I'm worried that on test day I will see a word I am not familiar with in the answer choices. Thank you so much, Jacquelyn.
Couple things. One, yes, there is something you should read to help increase your vocabulary, and that is everything. You should read everything all the time. Stop with social media, unsubscribe from Netflix, read books. I don't care what particularly you read. Um, I've recently been reading cozy sci-fi. You ever heard of this?
Cozy sci-fi. No, is this like sci-fi that you throw a blanket on, some warm socks, and just get cozy
Kinda.
with it?
It's like sci-fi where nothing really happens. It's sort of like in a sci-fi world, but it's like happy, just sort of happy stories. And like there's mild drama, but nothing really like bad. And it just has like sort of happy resolutions and no one gets killed. And it's not like war and anguish and despair. And instead it's just sort of like a happy crew getting along.
Sure. Yeah. Sounds like a
Mostly.
nice change of pace.
Yeah. But the point is just like, I don't care. Read Stephen King, read just anything that keeps you reading.
Mm.
And it's not going to necessarily help you tomorrow for the LSAT, but it will help you a year from now. It'll help you in law school. It'll help you in legal practice. You just need to develop a habit of reading because reading is what sharpens your weapons. I mean, you're going to be a gladiator of the English language. And every time you read, you are, reinforcing your shield and sharpening your sword.
Hmm.
So, um, I would just say, like, you don't need to read anything fancy. Just read a lot. Whatever keeps you reading, that's what you should read. You have any recommendations for stuff that Jacquelyn might like?
I feel like nonfiction stuff, when I read, I tend to encounter more new ideas or ideas that challenge me, and often that includes vocabulary that I haven't run into before. So if you can find some nonfiction stuff that sounds interesting to you, but maybe is slightly out of your wheelhouse, just something that you're not an expert in, but that you have some idea, hey, I might be interested in the French Revolution or whatever it is, I think reading nonfiction can be a good way
Cool.
to, yeah.
Yeah. This is fiction, my cozy sci-fi that I've been reading. Becky Chambers is the author. The first one was The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. And I liked it
Hmm.
enough that I'm reading this next one called A Closed and Common Orbit. And Yeah, I don't know. They're
Nice.
just they're kind of happy. I tend to read a mix of fiction and nonfiction. I just go back and forth.
Yeah.
Um, the other thing I wanted to say to Jacqueline is there are other ways to get the question right. It's really pretty rare that you have to know a particular word in order to answer a question correctly because
Very
you
rare.
you got your parachute and you got your backup parachute. And so sure, if you don't understand a word in the correct answer, then maybe your main parachute fails. But the backup parachute is refusing to pick wrong answers. And so if you have higher standards, where you're like, well, normally I'm going to pick an answer that I understand, but I do understand 4 out of these 5 answers and I understand each of them to be wrong.
Hmm.
Then maybe you can turn back around and answer, choose an answer that has one word in it that you don't understand because you just know that you can't pick the other answers.
If you can look at that and say to yourself, well, I don't know what onus means, but if it means
Mhm.
this thing, if it means
If it means
responsibility,
responsibility,
then I can definitely pick this answer choice.
yep.
And you don't get to do that unless, like you said, you eliminate conclusively the other four. But sometimes you can do that.
Well, one of the answers has to be right.
Yeah.
And so, um, yeah, you also, the little reading comprehension trick is to just put something in that spot. Literally something. Put
Mm.
something in that spot. So if it said the onus is on applicants to figure out the price of law school, read that as the something is on law students to figure out the cost of law school because the American Bar Association 509 report does not have a line for actual price of law school. This is a problem that I've been yelling about a lot. And I yelled about it so much on the most recent episode of Thinking LSAT 486. I really think that they need to fix those 509 reports and make it so that there's a line that just does the math for applicants instead of putting the something on law students to figure it out.
Yeah.
It should
They
just be on the
they
damn report.
they are not the most transparent. Despite those documents, which I'm glad we have, it is not the most transparent.
Well, the purpose of those documents is meant to be consumer protection,
Right.
right? But they've got the tuition on one page, and then the tuition is just fictional because most schools give discounts to almost everybody. And, they call them scholarships and grants when in fact what they are is discounts. And another way of saying it is charging everybody a different price, which economists call price discrimination. And that's a name that if they called it price discrimination, then people would get mad. Wait, you're discriminating based on price?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, they are. They're charging the most qualified applicants less and they're charging the least qualified applicants more. And that's like every law school does this, but they call it merit-based grants and scholarships. Well, I think the American Bar Association could fix this pretty easily by saying, hey, instead of having 2 separate tables on the 509, why don't you just have average price paid or median price paid, or hey, even better, 75th, 50th, and 25th percentile
Hmm.
price paid?
And we have seen in the past clear one example I can think of where more consumer transparency on an issue in law school admissions led to a change in their practices. I'm thinking about conditional scholarships.
Yeah,
Schools were not always required to disclose the
yeah,
fact that they sometimes yank scholarships away from
yeah,
students after their first year.
yep,
Once they started requiring schools to publish information about their
yeah,
conditional scholarships, the amount of conditional scholarships offered decreased
yeah,
because schools knew it was a bad look to have to
yeah,
admit to the world, hey, by the
yeah,
way, we take away scholarships from people.
yeah. And a line of actual price paid would, more easily make it easier to see
Hmm.
that the the tuition is just a fake number. I mean, that's just not what is actually being charged. Everybody gets charged a wildly different price where, the you're charging some people the actual nominal tuition, but you're only that's like a single digit. percentage of the
Right.
class that's actually
Right.
paying that much. And meanwhile, you're giving 25% of the class a full ride or even a stipend, paying zero, or they're actually getting paid to go there. And as we were talking about earlier, you know, application fees waived, credential assembly service fees waived. They're flying people out to go visit the school based on high LSAT, high GPA. Anyway, hopefully the ABA could take the onus off. You put something there in place of
Hmm.
onus.
And you'll realize that there's only so many things it could actually mean.
Right.
You start trying to inject other words. Well, could it mean desire?
No.
No. Could it mean hatred? No, that doesn't make
No.
grammatical sense. You can put the pieces together. And I think it's easiest when it's in an answer choice because you can get rid of the other four and then
Yeah.
realize, well, it must be this one. And it makes sense for me to interpret this word in this way.
Yeah.
And then if it's in the passage, usually you can do the same thing that Nathan said, use the something trick,
Yep.
or it just doesn't matter.
And
Or
that is
you have even more context based on the
yeah.
passage to figure out what the word
And
means.
that's frequently the case, that it's
Yeah.
just it doesn't matter the way you think it matters. So I wonder if Jacquelyn is, she sees a word that she's not familiar with, and then she's like, well, that's why I missed it. Um, that might be part of why you missed it.
Hmm.
But there could be lots of other reasons why you missed it. And in fact, the exact definition of that word might not really be much of a factor at all.
Hmm.
It's just like, did you read the rest of it? Because you could have answered the question already. They might have made some error in reasoning halfway through before they even got to the word onus, potentially.
Right.
And so, I'm not disagreeing, Jacquelyn. I like vocabulary does matter, and I want you to continue to sharpen those weapons by reading a lot. But there are ways around it when you encounter an unfamiliar word, because it happens all the time. I mean, you can't like I don't know the exact definitions of any of these words.
Mm.
I didn't memorize the dictionary. It's just
Right.
through context, I'm able to see a word like onus and go, oh, could it mean like a burden? Oh, yeah, burden is on. Oh, yeah. Okay, I'm familiar with that construction, even if I'm not familiar with the onus is on law students to figure out what law school costs. The burden is on law students or the responsibility is on law students. Yeah, yeah, that would fit. Okay, well, then maybe onus means burden or responsibility. You don't have to be like so precise about it. You just have to get the gist of it.
Yeah. One thing that I will add to this, and it seems
Yes.
crazy to me that I feel the need to say this, but recognize that you don't know for sure. I had a tutoring student at one point who would do this and would do this without telling me. And then we would be halfway through a passage and I would realize that he had come up with his idea of what a word meant like 2 paragraphs ago and it was incorrect. But we had worked on
Yeah.
trying to figure out the meanings of words based on context. And
Yeah.
he would say, okay, this is what I think it means. And then would just plow forward as with that as the truth of what that word definitely meant to him, which was wild. So just recognize
Yeah.
that when you fill in the blank a little bit, that you don't know 100%. So
Yeah.
don't be super duper confident about it.
Well, the thing is, you're always revising your understanding, right?
Yeah.
You have to like, I insist on understanding things. So I'll read something in a reading comprehension passage, maybe, and I'll be like, well, I'm not quite sure what you mean by that, but I think maybe you mean ABC. But then when I read further into the passage, if it doesn't seem like they meant ABC above, then I have to revisit that and go, oh, maybe you meant XYZ. Does that make sense now? And if that makes more sense, then I have to like revise my understanding. But it's like, yeah, it's funny, right? Because there's a humility and an ego involved at the same time, where it's like,
Mm-hmm.
I, I'm going to figure this shit out. Like I have enough ego that I'm going to insist that I'm going to figure this shit out.
Yeah.
But I also have humility in saying,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, but I might not understand, or like my first bite at it might not be correct.
Hmm.
I'm going to be able to revise that. I'm going to be able to actually learn something. That's what we're looking for in reading comprehension, right? You're trying to look
Yeah.
down the road. What have you said so far? I'm going to unpack it to the best of my ability. And then I'm going to predict, I'm going to try to think like, okay, so if that's really what you've said, then here's what I think you would next say. And then if I read something surprising down the road, then it's like, oh, well, wait a second. Maybe could be that they just threw me a curveball, but it could also be that I didn't understand something properly earlier. So maybe I need to
Right.
refresh there.
Yeah. It's not a, I mean, it's not a linear process reading.
Right.
And I think there's studies that back this up. You don't really read
Right.
one word and then a second word and then a third word. You're always going back and forth.
And you
It's
reread
natural.
all the time. Yeah.
Yep.
You're
Hmm.
going back all the time.
Yep.
Okay. I think that's pretty much it for Jacqueline.
Yes. And
Thank you.
I would just say one more thing that
Yeah.
Nathan, you and Ben have advised many times in the past, which is just make the dictionary your friend. Always look up the meanings of words.
Yeah. Yep. Look it up when you're reading and when you're writing. Just look it up. It's interesting. And that's another way that you can work on sharpening those tools. Thanks for pointing that out.
Yep.
Thank you, Jacqueline, for writing us in. You can email daily@lsatdemon.com if you would like to ask us a question or share some LSAT or law school admissions news. Thanks for listening.